Have you ever given someone your full attention, your loyalty, your warmth, and still watched him slowly drift away as if what you offered meant nothing? That sting is real. You replay every text, every call, every late night talk, wondering where you went wrong. You try harder. You become softer, more patient, more available, more understanding. And somehow that only makes him colder. Strange, isn't it? The more you move toward him, the more he steps back, until you are left standing there with questions he never answers. But what if the problem was never that you cared too much? What if the real issue was where that care was being placed and what it was silently teaching him about your value? Stay with me, because this changes everything. There is a hard truth most people never say out loud. Attraction is not built only by kindness, effort, or loyalty. It is shaped by emotional impact. It is shaped by how valuable, how centered, how difficult to possess you feel in another person's mind. And once you understand that, once you stop offering your energy like it has no cost, the whole dynamic starts to shift. What used to confuse you begins to make sense. What used to feel painful starts to look predictable. And what once made you chase can become the very reason he starts to turn around and chase you instead. Many women believe love grows when they give more. More patience, more reassurance, more understanding, more chances. They think if they prove they are loyal enough, sweet enough, or supportive enough, he will finally see their worth and rise to meet them. But often the opposite happens. When your presence becomes guaranteed, when your forgiveness becomes automatic, and when your attention keeps flowing, no matter how little he gives back, he stops feeling the need to earn access to you. He becomes comfortable, not devoted, comfortable. And comfort without respect is dangerous. Because a man who feels fully secure in your admiration, while investing little himself, can begin to enjoy the benefits of your affection without developing any deeper fear of losing it. That is where the imbalance begins. Look closely and you will see it. He gives less, you explain more. He pulls back, you lean in. He becomes vague, you become clearer. He acts uncertain, you try to be unforgettable. But each extra effort, when it comes from anxiety, can secretly tell him the same message. I will stay even if you do not show up fully. And once that message settles in, he no longer feels challenged by your absence. He only feels comforted by your predictability. That is why this matters so much. Because what drains attraction is not love itself. It is one-sided emotional labor dressed up as love. At the center of this pattern is something powerful, ego. Not loud arrogance on the surface, but the deep inner hunger to feel chosen, desired, important, and impossible to replace. Many men carry that hunger quietly. They may look confident, independent, even emotionally detached. But underneath that image, there is often a strong need for confirmation. They want to feel they matter. They want to feel they can affect you. They want to feel that when they enter your life, something shifts. And when that need is constantly fed without effort, when your admiration is always available, when your time is easy to access, and when your emotions remain open no matter how he behaves, his ego grows lazy. It feeds, but it does not deepen. It enjoys being centered, but it does not necessarily learn to value the source. This is the part many people miss. A swollen ego does not create stronger love. It often creates weaker respect. He may enjoy knowing you care. He may enjoy the warmth, the comfort, the emotional supply. But enjoyment is not obsession, and attention is not devotion. If he feels no risk, no uncertainty, no real consequence for distance, then your presence becomes background music in his life. Pleasant, familiar, but no longer powerful. And once that happens, you start overgiving, not because he earned more, but because you fear losing what was never fully secured in the first place. This is why the dynamic changes the moment you stop feeding what expects to be fed. When you interrupt the endless stream of validation, when you stop explaining every feeling, when you stop rewarding confusion with more effort, something unexpected happens inside him. He feels the shift. He may not admit it. He may not even understand it right away, but he feels it. The mirror that reflected his importance back to him is no longer always there. The easy reassurance disappears. The predictable reaction vanishes, and suddenly he is no longer moving through the relationship with the same emotional certainty. This is where curiosity begins. This is where tension is born. Not from cruelty, not from games, and not from fake drama, but from emotional self-respect. Because when a woman is no longer easy to read through anxiety, when she no longer rushes to fix every crack, when she can step back without panic, she becomes far more difficult to take for granted. Listen carefully, because this matters. The goal is not to become cold, the goal is to become grounded. There is a difference. Coldness is performance, groundedness is power. One tries to punish, the other simply refuses to abandon itself. And that refusal changes everything. Because now he cannot lean on the old pattern. Now he must face the possibility that your energy is not automatic, your loyalty is not careless, and your presence is not his by default. Most men do not become deeply fixated on what feels endlessly available. They become intensely aware of what feels valuable, alive, and not fully owned. That does not mean chaos is attractive. It means emotional certainty without earned depth can kill mystery. Think about how often people chase what they do not fully understand, what they cannot fully secure, what seems just close enough to touch and still far enough to lose. The mind pays attention to uncertainty. It loops around it, it studies it, it replays it. That is why emotional scarcity, when it comes from self-control, has such force. If every time he goes quiet, you immediately chase the connection. You remove the cost of his withdrawal. If every time he becomes inconsistent, you answer with greater availability. You teach him that distance still gets rewarded. But if in the exact moment he expects your usual reaction, you respond with calm detachment and a life that continues without collapse. His mind runs into something it does not like, unanswered tension. He starts wondering, has your focus shifted? Are you finally seeing him clearly? Are you no longer affected in the same way? That quiet uncertainty can hit much harder than tears or arguments ever could. Stay here because this is the turning point. Real power in connection begins when your nervous system stops volunteering your value to anyone who has not learned how to protect it. One of the strongest forms of that power is silence. Not wounded silence, not childish silence, not silence used like a stunt. Deliberate silence, clean silence, the kind that comes from emotional discipline. When someone expects instant access to your feelings and suddenly finds stillness instead, the impact can be enormous. Silence creates space, and space forces truth into the open. If he sends a vague message just to test whether you are still emotionally available, you do not have to rush in and prove you are. If he pulls back to see whether you will chase, you do not have to perform anxiety on command. If he goes cold and waits for you to warm the room again, you do not have to volunteer that warmth immediately. Sometimes the strongest response is no quick response at all. That silence does something words rarely can. It breaks the pattern. It removes the script. It tells him, without saying it directly, that your emotional energy is no longer handed out on demand. And that silence echoes. Because now he must sit with himself. He must sit with the absence of your usual reassurance, the absence of your explanations, the absence of your effort to hold the thread together alone. And in that absence, his mind becomes loud. He fills the space with guesses, doubts, and possibilities. This is where many women make the mistake of rushing back in too soon. Don't. Let the silence breathe. Let it do its work. Let him feel what your predictable attention once protected him from. There is also an art to measured interest. Being powerful does not mean acting like you feel nothing. It means you express interest without surrendering your center. You let him know he is seen, but never that he is your oxygen. You enjoy the connection, but you do not build your whole emotional climate around it. You allow warmth, but never dependence. This balance is subtle, and that is exactly why it is so effective. Maybe the conversation is flowing and the chemistry feels strong. That is often the moment to end first. Leave while the energy is high. Let him sit with the aftertaste of your presence. Let him want a little more. Maybe he reaches out with something vague, lazy, or half-hearted. Instead of leaning forward, you respond briefly, calmly, or not immediately at all. Not to punish him, but to protect your pace. You stop giving premium access to minimum effort. This one shift alone can transform the dynamic. Because when he no longer controls when the connection starts, when it deepens, and when it cools, he begins to feel your rhythm instead of assuming you will follow his. And once he starts adjusting to your rhythm, something important happens. The balance of power begins to move. Watch closely, because this is where many women reclaim themselves. They stop reacting from fear and start responding from value. That energy is unforgettable. It is composed. It is rare. And yes, it can make a man think about you far more than loud displays of devotion ever could. A woman who is hard to control emotionally often becomes impossible to ignore. Not because she is dramatic, not because she is cruel, but because she does not hand over her peace every time someone tests it. She does not beg to be understood by a man committed to misunderstanding her. She does not collapse when attention fluctuates. She does not treat mixed signals like hidden depths. She sees what is there and then she responds from clarity. That kind of emotional steadiness unsettles people who are used to pulling strings if he is used to women reacting fast. Over-explaining, seeking closure, asking where things stand, and trying to repair every distance he creates, then your calm restraint will feel foreign. He will expect fear and get composure. He will expect pressure and get space. He will expect pursuit and get stillness. And that contrast can land hard, because now he is not facing a woman he can guide with inconsistency. He is facing someone who can remain intact without his approval. That is a completely different experience. It forces him to question whether he ever had the influence he thought he had. It also forces him to confront something even more uncomfortable. If you are discentered without him, then someone else could easily recognize your worth too. And once that thought enters his mind, the emotional stakes rise. He begins to feel the possibility of losing what he once assumed would wait forever. That feeling can wake up attention, urgency, and pursuit in ways endless reassurance never will. This becomes even stronger when your life visibly expands without him. Nothing strikes harder than a woman who stops shrinking around disappointment and starts growing anyway. No speeches, no threats, no dramatic exits, just growth, real growth. You look better because you care for yourself. You sound different because your mind is sharper. You move differently because your confidence is no longer borrowed. You begin building a life with momentum, with friends, with purpose, with plans, with standards, with peace. And the key is this: you do it for real, not as a performance, not to post a message between the lines, not to make him jealous with staged happiness. You do it because your life deserves your full investment. And when that becomes visible, even from a distance, the effect is powerful. He sees or senses that you are no longer parked in one emotional place waiting to be chosen. You are moving, you are blooming, you are becoming. That can create a deep sting in a man who once relied on your constant availability, because now he must face a painful contrast. When you were centered on him, he relaxed. When you became centered on yourself, you became magnetic. This is the irony so many people discover too late. The less your life revolves around him, the more he may start revolving around the thought of you. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally stopped making him the center of a world that should have always belonged to you first. Do not underestimate how deeply comparison operates in silence. You do not need to compare him to another man with words. You do not need to announce that he is replaceable. In fact, the strongest message is never spoken directly. It is felt. When he senses that he is no longer your only emotional option, no longer the axis around which your moods spin, no longer the sole gatekeeper of your excitement, his mind begins to race. This does not require a new relationship. It does not require mind games. It only requires that your world becomes visibly fuller, richer, and less dependent on his attention. He starts asking questions he never asked before. If she can be okay without me, who else might notice her? If she is no longer chasing, what changed? If I reach out, will I get the same version of her? These questions create friction, and friction creates focus. Suddenly, what once felt safe starts to feel unstable. What once felt guaranteed starts to feel temporary. And the ego does not enjoy that. It wants to restore its position. It wants to be important again. It wants to confirm that it still matters. This is why a man who ignored you for weeks can become strangely attentive. The moment he feels your emotional distance is real. It is not always love waking up. Sometimes it is the shock of lost influence. That is why you must stay clear. Do not confuse renewed attention with transformed character. Watch actions, watch consistency, watch effort, because true value is not measured by how urgently he returns, but by how differently he shows up once he does. Every relationship can fall into a pattern. He withdraws, you pursue, he gives crumbs. You make a meal out of them. He tests the connection lightly. You respond with your whole heart. Over time, this becomes a script, and both people begin acting from it almost automatically. The problem is that scripts feel safe even when they are hurting you. You know your role. He knows his. The dance repeats until one person gets tired or one person finally breaks the rhythm. If you want a different outcome, you must be willing to break the old choreography. When he ignores a message, do not answer with panic. When he sends a breadcrumb, do not treat it like a feast. When he tries to trigger jealousy, do not volunteer a reaction. When he uses guilt, vagueness, or subtle emotional pressure, do not rush to defend yourself. Stay firm. Stay soft inside if you want, but stay firm outside. You do not have to explain every boundary to someone benefiting from your lack of one. This is where your strength gets tested. Because the old version of you will want relief. It will want to reach out, clear the air, reopen the door, restore the familiar. But familiar is exactly what kept you stuck. Keep watching, because this part matters. The moment you stop dancing to his rhythm, he feels the loss of control. And people are often most fascinated by what they can no longer steer with ease. There is a kind of restlessness that appears in someone when they realize their usual methods no longer work. He may have been used to charming his way back in, delaying real effort, keeping things emotionally blurry, and still receiving your full attention. But once you become less predictable in the old way and more stable in a new way, he feels resistance. He reaches for the buttons that once moved you and finds they do not work like before. That can create a very specific tension, frustration mixed with fascination. Distance mixed with desire. He may start thinking about you more, not because you became louder, but because you became quieter in a way he cannot control. You become a question mark in his mind, a pattern that broke, a woman who did not react on schedule, a presence that left an imprint without begging to be remembered. This is where obsession can begin for some men. But listen carefully. Your focus should never be on creating obsession. Your focus should be on creating standards. Obsession is not the goal. Self-command is the goal, because if he begins chasing from a bruised ego but you still have no boundaries, the story simply repeats with different timing. That is why inner work matters so much. You need more than a strategy. You need a new identity, one that does not confuse being wanted with being valued, one that does not confuse intensity with respect, one that does not accept pursuit as proof of maturity. The woman who truly shifts this dynamic is not merely harder to get. She is harder to destabilize. So while he is trying to understand what changed, your real work is happening somewhere deeper. You are rebuilding the relationship with yourself. You are learning not to measure your worth by response times, mixed signals, temporary affection, or emotional breadcrumbs. You are teaching your heart that attention is not the same as care and chemistry is not the same as consistency. This is the expansion that truly changes your life, because once you stop seeing his focus as proof of your value, you stop being easy to manipulate. You stop overperforming. You stop auditioning for a place in someone's life that should be earned through mutual depth and real presence. Instead, you begin asking better questions. Does he show effort when it is inconvenient? Does he communicate with honesty or only when he feels uncertain about losing me? Does he create peace or confusion? Does his attention come with intention or only with appetite? These questions protect you. They slow you down. They bring you back to reality when attraction tries to write fantasy over facts. And that is important, because powerful energy without discernment can still lead you into the same trap wearing a different face. Stay with me now, because this is where everything sharpens. The strongest version of you is not the woman who can make a man obsess. It is the woman who can remain deeply desired without ever abandoning herself to achieve it. If at some point he returns with real effort, real clarity, and real consistency, you do not meet him as the same woman who once accepted confusion. You meet him from a higher place, warmer maybe, wiser definitely, but also more selective, more observant, more emotionally expensive in the best way. He does not get instant access just because he reappears. He does not get full trust just because he sounds sincere for a moment. He earns closeness through steadiness. He earns access through action. He earns your softness by proving he can handle it without exploiting it. This is the part many people skip, and it is why so many stories restart only to collapse again. They mistake a return for a transformation, but a return only means he came back. Transformation means the behavior changed, the pattern changed, the emotional responsibility changed. So if he reaches for you again, slow the pace. Let time reveal truth. Let consistency carry more weight than charm. Let his effort speak longer than his words. Meanwhile, remain connected to your own life. Keep your mission. Keep your routines. Keep your peace. Keep your standards visible, not as a threat, but as a way of living. A man may be strongly drawn to the woman he cannot control, but he will only stay in a healthy way if he learns that your depth is not something he can touch carelessly. That lesson is not taught with speeches. It is taught by the quality of what you allow. And here is the deeper layer most people never say clearly enough. When you master this emotional discipline, the outcome with him starts to matter less than the outcome within you. Yes, he may think about you more. Yes, he may pursue harder. Yes, he may suddenly realize your value when your energy is no longer easy to reach. But the greatest reward is not his attention. It is your freedom. The freedom of no longer begging for what should be given willingly, the freedom of no longer collapsing under uncertainty, the freedom of no longer trying to prove your worth to someone determined to consume it without honoring it. That freedom changes your face, your voice, your posture, your choices, your standards, your future. It is visible. People feel it. The world responds to it. And this is why the woman who truly wins in the end is not the one who simply becomes unforgettable to a man. It is the one who becomes undeniable to herself. That inner certainty is what makes your silence powerful instead of bitter, your absence meaningful instead of manipulative, and your presence magnetic instead of needy. Once you have that, everything else rearranges around it. Relationships improve, decisions sharpen, attraction becomes cleaner. You stop chasing intensity and start choosing alignment. You stop worshipping potential and start honoring patterns. And from that place, even love feels different, because it is no longer something you beg for in fear. It becomes something you allow with discernment. So remember this. You do not have to force anyone to see your worth. You do not have to argue your value into someone's heart. You do not have to become louder, smaller, prettier, more available, or more forgiving just to keep a weak connection alive. Real power begins the moment you stop feeding unhealthy patterns with your energy. When you stop rewarding distance. When you stop translating inconsistency into mystery. When you stop treating your devotion like it should be free. Leave room. Let absence speak. Let silence reveal. Let your life become so full, so grounded, so alive that anyone who comes near you can feel there is substance here, standards here, consequence here. And if that awakens urgency in him, let it be met with wisdom, not hunger. Let him feel that your attention has weight now. Let him discover that your presence is not ordinary. Let him understand, through calm and not chaos, that losing you would cost more than he once believed. But above all, let yourself fully understand this final truth. The point was never to make someone obsessed while you stay empty inside. The point was to become so centered, so emotionally clear, and so deeply rooted in your own worth that whether he comes closer, runs back, or fades away, you remain whole. And that is the kind of power no one can take from you. If you really felt this, then you already know the shift has started. Read that again in your mind. Sit with it. Because once you stop chasing what disrespects your value, your entire life begins to move in a different direction.